The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
When John heard in prison that the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" Jesus answered him, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to look for? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal palaces. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly I tell you, among those born of women, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Grace to you and peace from God, our Creator, our brother Jesus, and the Spirit who gives us grace. Thank you. Are you the one who is to come, or are we to look for another? Isn't that a question that just breaks your heart? Or maybe it speaks truth, perhaps many truths. Truths that so often we can't find the words or the strength or the courage even to say. This week we find John the Baptist in a very different place than he was last week. He has now gone from wilderness school to pent-upness, from freedom to confinement, from open spaces to the captivity of a cell. A change of place can cause us to change our perspective. No longer in the wilderness, no longer baptizing in the Jordan River, no longer having people come out to the wilderness to see him. John is now in a different desert, no longer prophesying, but questioning, with people likely positioning themselves as far away from him as they possibly can get. But then when we are imprisoned, our questions do change. When we are captive, our yearnings and desires change. When our freedom to roam has been taken away, then we have an altered sense of what freedom is for us. And perhaps it could be the freedom to ask questions that we've been afraid to ask before. Perhaps there are questions that you dare not give voice to, or maybe you have been told not even to utter those questions. But what is the root of all of those questions? Does it come from a place of speculation or introspection? Does it come from a place of interrogation or from a place of true, authentic inquiry? Perhaps it comes from a place of disappointment or from a place of newly discovered determination that perhaps God might not always match up with nor meet our own expectations. Are you the one who is to come, or do we wait for another? That, I believe, is really the heart of Advent. It gives voice to our hesitancy, even in the midst of our own waiting. It allows us to express, perhaps, uncertainty, even though our own viewpoints are on this side of the incarnation. It provides us with words to articulate what our heart, our souls actually feel, and when our minds try to convince us to stay quiet. Are you the one who is to come, or do we look for another? It is a question that we ask from our own prisons, those places that confine us and limit us in our imagination of who God is now. It is a question that we ask from our own penitentiaries that can't see beyond the concrete walls of divide and difference. It is the question that we ask from our own jails to justify our advantaged views of God over another. Are you the one who is to come? Or are we to wait for another? That is the question of our longing. It is the question of our deep yearning for what we hope for, and we wonder what might be. Longing for promises to come true, even when it seems that the cards are stacked against us. Yearning for what was, but at the same time, looking forward to what could be in our lives together tomorrow. And did you notice that John asks Jesus a straightforward question? Are you the one? It's a yes or no answer, right? But Jesus says something different. He invites John to examine what he sees and what he hears. That the blind have received their sight. That the lame now walk. The lepers are healed. The deaf hear, and even the dead are raised. And the poor have good news of God's love brought to them. What have you seen? What have you heard? This week, as we live our Advent together, ask those questions for yourself. Consider those questions as we gather in congregational meeting after worship to approve a budget of how we're going to be engaged in mission and ministry in the coming year. Ask those questions for the community in which we live. Ask it together Not to necessarily answer it. That's not what I'm getting at. Not to solve it. Not to tie it up in a nice Christmas bow and put under the tree. But to ask it together, to lean into the waiting, the wanting, the yearning from deep within us, and the wonder of that question. Are you the one that in our stillness we may hear God's answer to us? Amen.